All right, and we are live. Peace and great blessings, everyone out there in the listening audience. I'm your host, Queen Tamara. Welcome to my show, and please like and subscribe if you're new. Tonight's guest, I'm so excited that my big brother is back in the studio with me, Brother McCool Ray. And tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about the new planetary and cosmic changes. And um, so also welcome all of you who observe the Gregorian New Year. Welcome on this first day of 2025. And I thought that this topic tonight would be perfect for this new cycle, this new beginning. And so, with the new year brings new cycles of time. Those of us who follow the natural time and frequencies of the planet, this is the year, the blue rhythmic storm. And both that and the new year bring the hopes of change, harmony, and peace. Not only is this a new calendar year, but this is a time for several new Earth, planetary, and cosmic changes that are predicted to take place this year. So, with these new changes comes an influx of cosmic energies. We want to be aware of them to align ourselves with them for our highest good. And our brother is going to take us further into this topic and discussion. So, welcome, Brother McCoy.
Thank you, Queen Tamara. It's an honor to be with you again, family. Good to be here, and thanks for the opportunity
In
to tap
Lakesh.
in. Alakin and Lakesh Alakin, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. So, share with the listener audience a little bit about yourself for those who might be new and this is their first time hearing you speak.
Sure, thank you. I guess my passion has to do with natural time and
Mhm.
using that as a lens to perceive or make sense of our third dimensional phenomena and sort of our material reality. But natural time really draws from an indigenous perspective on timekeeping. In fact, it draws directly from the traditional Maya
Mhm.
and their application of various lenses. And one of them is a calendar frame of the 260-day
Mhm.
calendar, which is really a reflection of our gestation cycle. So it's a reflection of a natural creative cycle. But along with my passion for calendar change, I'm a musician.
Mhm.
I'm a father and a partner to my beloved Ishel, and very grateful just to have the experience in this earth life. We are living in a very phenomenal time,
Mhm.
and depending upon the vantage or lens you are using
Mhm.
to make sense of it, this could seem like a time of challenge, and it can also seem like a time of great opportunity.
Mhm.
So we like to lean into hopefully seeing the positive and loving view on what is before us,
Mhm.
while also being clear about the various aspects of what is happening within and around us.
Mhm.
And so anyway, that's just a little bit about me, and I'm really happy to be here. It's a very sacred window in which we find ourselves right
Yes.
now. So happy New Year, as you said, to those who do celebrate the Gregorian New Year. Obviously, we're all impacted by
Mhm.
that frame of reference to one degree or another.
Mhm.
But an interesting question I've also been looking at lately is which New Year?
Yes.
Because there are several different New Years, and some of them actually show up around now, as obviously we're in the window where you have the Chinese New Year coming up very soon,
Indeed. Yes.
which also has an influence on us
Mhm.
energetically, psychologically. It can even inspire us. It gives us a
Absolutely.
perspective on ourselves individually and perhaps the cycles that we're experiencing collectively.
We just had the winter solstice a few weeks ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago, and that also for some people is a new year. I know some people observe that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's another example of a natural timing cycle that
Yes.
we can point to when we say natural time.
Mhm.
And when we say natural time, we're also saying that as opposed to artificial time. So when we do look at the Gregorian calendar, for example, we identify that in essence as an artificial timing construct
Mhm.
because it's not exactly rooted or connected with the complex of natural timing uh, examples that exist in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, starting January 1st, for example, as your new year. It's a pretty arbitrary start point for a
Yes.
calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some could suggest that that had to do with an adjustment at some point between the Julian and Gregorian calendar, because the Julian calendar would have been oriented to December 21st, going back to
Oh, I
the
see.
solstice by that 10-day
Mm-hmm.
shift or drift, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at different points across our collective timeline, the timing mechanisms have changed. And over time, though, they've become less oriented to natural cycles. And what happens is that now, at this point in the experience, we're 4 centuries deep plus
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
a dominating timekeeping system that has us disconnected from natural timing, though it's not even something we're aware of.
Mm.
So there's a lot happening at this window also, because when we talk about the shifts that are happening with the planets, we want to also include in this equation the shifts happening to us genetically, because
Yeah.
there's an impact that we experience energetically, um, biogenetically, epigenetically, from the influence of the planets in their organic
Indeed.
process and cycles. And
Mm-hmm.
so oftentimes we don't have a way to necessarily measure that or make sense of that, nor are we even aware that that's happening. But rest assured, right now, everything on some subtle to greater level of magnitude is being affected and evolved by the creation itself.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this dynamic balancing of what's going on in the material plane with global dynamism and the global conflicts and world economy and the political, geopolitical structures and
Mm-hmm.
dramas and our personal day-to-day lives and all that.
Yes.
And beyond that, that's just one layer of a
Mm-hmm.
perception of reality. But beyond that, there are other factors organizing with and through us and around us
Mm-hmm.
of a higher level that have to do more broadly with qualitative evolutionary shifts of us
Mm.
as actually as a species.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to understand, we tend to perceive life through a lens of our own individuation.
Mm-hmm.
However, right now, what's happening on the stage of life is something that's affecting us biogenetically more than it ever has before. Part of that is also a result of the solar maximum cycles that we are now navigating. We're
Mm-hmm.
navigating a very interesting cycle, in the sense that we're navigating sort of a cycle that's occurred after the December 21st, 2012 date. Here we are now,
Mm-hmm.
11, 12 years later,
Well, yep.
in this solar maximum cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the solar maximum usually on average go about 11 and a half years. And
Okay.
then there's more of a dormancy cycle. So you have the maximum, you have the minimum. A
Mm-hmm.
total of about 22 years is a full solar cycle in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give a sense, there are all of these factors that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And when we again say Happy New Year, in a sense, that is on the level of kind of a mundane or material plane. That makes sense here, though we, in a way, discount or don't connect to the fact there's a greater orchestration happening that is connected to other cycles, other timing factors, other experiences.
Indeed.
Anyway, I'll stick a pin in it there for a minute, but
Yeah, that was a lot. Yeah. But you mentioned there's two questions that arose in my mind as you were speaking. You mentioned the Julian calendar. I don't know much about that one. I know that was the one before they implemented the Gregorian count. But did that one also have 12 months or did it have 13?
that has 12 months.
It
And I
does.
say has because effectively the Julian calendar still exists.
It does. Okay.
There are many timekeeping mechanisms, even in the modern era, that are still calculated based on the Julian calendar because of the fact that it's tethered to certain markers that, for the sake of keeping consistent count, when
Hmm.
the Gregorian calendar came about, for example, 10 days were removed
Yes.
from the Julian calendar. But those, say, aspects of society that were functioning based on the Julian count would still have to reference that. Even when you deal with NASA or astronomical measures, they still measured to the Julian count, you see,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
versus the Gregorian. And so what happens is in modern timekeeping, you have a conundrum of various calendars
Mm-hmm.
that are still being used to make sense or to help the operating of society.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's very confusing, it's a mess
Mm-hmm.
because and I'd say maybe a better word is cumbersome, because it's so many different points of origin or timing that are being used to calculate and again manage or identify or measure these various systems, that it becomes obviously very complicated. So a lot of computers are used
Mm-hmm.
to basically make sense of it. And then the Julian calendar itself goes through various phases where it's broken down sort of in fractals to make it easier to keep the time of that calendar, because again, like I said, it still operates. Now, the Gregorian calendar came along as a new civil standard for the global society, and
Okay.
it replaced the Julian calendar for your everyday use in civil
Mm-hmm.
society. And that happened in the year 1582.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it began to be implemented, when it was instituted by Pope Gregory the 13th, which is
Mm-hmm.
where it gets its name, the Gregorian
Gregorian.
calendar, right? So the Julian before that gets its name from Julius Caesar of
Mm-hmm.
the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Julius Caesar, you have um, Augustus, Caesar Augustus, yes. So those are two big influences, which in the translation of the language of that we even still use today in the nomenclature, you have July and August, Julius and Augustus. So even today in the Gregorian calendar,
Mm-hmm.
which was Roman essentially, but then out of Rome comes the Vatican, etc., the Catholic
Yes.
Church, the establishing of the Gregorian calendar, but you still have the homage to these emperors of Rome,
Mm-hmm.
Julius and Augustus,
Augustus Caesar, right?
right? And a lot of the other calendar names in the calendar, the Gregorian calendar we acknowledge today, have Latin origins.
Yes.
The languages generally do as well. So it's interesting, though, because again, these are examples of artificial time. And they were also coordinated to create systems for land tax collection, which was their predominant use, and organizing that among their various subjects in the
Mm-hmm.
society. So when we look at the Gregorian calendar, its main purpose is a basis of debt collection. It's
Yes.
really used for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's obviously a lot of things we could talk about, but I mean the 12 months, for example, with uneven measure
Mm-hmm.
creates greater room for error when it comes to accounting.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, like inconsistencies can be hidden in that unevenness of number that become difficult to manage or identify just based on the way that that system is so erratic.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Versus, like, for example, a natural measure of a moon
Mm-hmm.
would be 7 days times 4, or
What?
your 4 weeks per month, or month,
Mm-hmm.
similar word, same
Mm-hmm.
root. But to say that 28 days is actually a perfect reflection of a creative cycle in nature. It
Yes.
also happens to be the reflection of the frequency of the fertility cycle,
Mm-hmm.
without which we wouldn't have human life.
Indeed.
So again, these cycles are very in our face all the time, but we've been disconnected from an awareness of them due to subjugation under this other dominating system.
Mm-hmm.
Now in this era of information, though, we've made quantum leaps in terms of what we're actually aware of now. Like our knowledge base is exponentializing, so we can't be necessarily suppressed
Mm-hmm.
if we don't want to be at this point. Like, if you don't want to be suppressed, you definitely don't have to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can go free yourself and educate yourself and come to understand these mechanics of creation and how in many cases we've been disconnected from them.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a lot to do with returning to nature, returning to a sensitivity for nature. So
Indeed.
taking advantage of this window right now is so special. Just given that we're in the return to the light, we're past that solstice point now. We're coming to the light,
Mhm.
really, and we're in that return path now. And we're going to be riding this essence, over the next several months. The new year that I personally observe takes place with the rising of the star Sirius, but that
Yes.
doesn't occur till the end of July.
Hmm.
And so that's the new year that I personally observe, because that's an orientation to the galactic
Same here. Yeah.
timing frequency. But the interesting thing is we have right here in the heart of winter, in a
Hmm.
few weeks, we have a very, very significant window. Both the planetary alignment is before us. There are several
Hmm.
celestial things happening. But then, as I mentioned, there is an opportunity to quantum leap or even shift timelines according to our genetic code. And why do I say that? There is something called the gene keys,
Hmm.
which is a new knowledge base that emerged out of something called human design.
Hmm.
And human design takes into account your astrology. It takes into account aspects of the I Ching, system, divination system, and it takes into account aspects of our genetics that show sort of the timing phases of our genetics and the way that we come online individually based on that combination of the astrological and that influence of the celestial combined with our actual genetic and protein elements. So this is kind of high science, but what's happening is we're literally being caused to mutate. We are literally mutating right now as a human species.
Like
We
the
don't
X-Men.
In a way,
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
it's like that, and it's funny, like art imitates life, life imitates art. So what
Hmm.
is the X-Men saying to us as an example where it's making, and this is a very interesting point, because the X-Men would be a fantasy,
Mm.
okay? That would be categorized as a fantasy. Now, in the gene keys, again, which is a code of our human genetics, you are coming to the date January 21st in
Hmm.
3 weeks from today. So in 3 weeks from today, we enter what's called Gene Key 41. And Gene Key 41 is also regarded as the start codon of our human genetic evolution, essentially. It's
Okay.
the start codon. Um, and it's interesting because according to the gene keys, everything functions basically on a level of the shadow, of the gift, and of the city. And the
Mm.
city being spelled Siddhi, city, like acidic quality or like a superpower. Now,
Hmm.
you mentioned the X-Men, and I want
Yes.
to point out that the shadow of Gene Key 41 is fantasy.
Mm.
And so when we look at the X-Men, that's a fantasy movie.
Hmm.
Superhero movie, it's a fantasy movie. The reality is, though, that we are called in the gift of Gene Key 41 to anticipate. It's in the anticipation of something. So in other words, you know how in positive thinking, we're called to live in the expectancy of something,
Hmm.
knowing it's coming.
Right.
In other words, we know fundamentally as a human species that our essential nature is freedom. We also
Indeed.
know that we've been living under an artificial suppression of our freedom.
Hmm.
And beyond that, we know that freedom is afoot. It is right before us.
You're
So we're
right.
in that
Right.
moment of anticipation of a new expression of freedom.
Hmm.
Now, that is shifting from the fantasy
Hmm.
through the gift of anticipation into what's called the Siddhic value of emanation.
Mm.
And imagine emanation is in some ways a reflection of the nature of the sun. We could look at emanation, radiation, the emanation of light, energy. So
Hmm.
when we're operating at that higher vibration of our generative potential and reality, then we're emanating. We're
Mm.
we're 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 sustaining life effectively. We're the start of a life process. So what's happened is in the cycle of returning to awareness and consciousness that we're all going through right now, the age of Aquarius, since we've
Mhm.
just literally crossed into that. So many celestial events happening in a
Mhm.
compressed manner right now that it's like supercharged.
Yes.
So it's bringing everything online in an accelerated way. This January 21st, though, is important to note because, again, that is gene key 41, and it goes through a phase. Basically, what happens is the sun
Mhm.
is going through its incremental phase, and it effectively, in its nature, is lighting up or activating these various aspects of our genetic code.
The sun is activating
Our
our genetic
sun
code.
is
Okay.
doing this. This is literally how life is even sustained. But imagine like a time release program. Nothing
Mm.
happens before it's time. And in order to even be prepared, we have to go through certain initiation or preparation. So collectively, we've
Ashe.
now come to a point in our collective evolution where we are initiated enough to go to a new level.
Give thanks for that.
And that new level has a lot to do with
Mhm.
expanding our worldview to include the possibilities of interdimensional, interplanetary, galactic scale life.
Mm.
Meaning that, one example could be considered when we talk about, you know, our higher selves.
Mhm.
We could be talking about non biological entities. In
Mhm.
other words, or we talk about extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings. Because right now I have my mundane self. I have the self I identify as Makua and this physical form and this body. And
Mhm.
yet I'm tethered to my higher self
Mhm.
that in variable, ratios, has greater or lesser experience in and with the physical form, though it's always operational. So we're
Mhm.
always connected with the higher form. Though even today in a conversation with a brethren earlier, it occurred to me that that's really a non-biological entity,
Mhm.
meaning it's not in the body. Though
Yes.
when people talk about near-death experiences, like the brother was sharing with me, they talk about encountering non-biological entities.
Yes.
So what if we're evolving or returning to coherence and connection with the aspects of ourselves that are conscious, living entities of light, of energy, of beingness that aren't expressly our physical, how do you want to say, our physical, what's the word for it? Well, your representative, basically. Like these bodies, these bodies and these natures in many ways may be stand-ins for the real deal. In other words, that
Agree.
we're not just here and it doesn't just end here, nor does it
Mhm.
begin here. It's a broader cycle. But we've also been in many ways quarantined, consciously quarantined
Mhm.
for several thousand years.
Yeah.
Michelle and I were watching a broadcast last night on ancient aliens, I think it was, but it was going into the ancient Sumerian civilization. This
Mhm.
is something we have to understand that we don't really talk about much. But the Sumerian civilization and the Anunnaki and the whole gene splicing
Mhm.
dynamic, what they talk about in their narratives and written in cuneiform, like the stories they talk about from over 6 or 7 thousand years ago, that's
Mhm.
some dynamic stuff. But it seems like it would be even happening right now. It's so advanced,
Mhm.
but it's also lost to time. So we don't really have the memory of it, and we only have fragments of the archaeological evidence to support the remembrance of these events that have happened. But
Mhm.
we can't neglect the fact that they've happened.
Yes.
So we're still dealing with amnesia in many ways. So we
And
don't even
yes.
remember what's actually happening here.
Right.
Though we do come to windows of opportunity, and we're
Mhm.
at one such window right now.
Yes. And
And this is, yeah. So
yeah.
this is where we are now.
That was perfect for the next question I wanted to ask you, the perfect precursor. Yes, I agree that the higher self, I think that we are multidimensional, and so it's different aspects of us in different dimensions all at once, I think. And
Yeah, yeah,
this is just an expression of one part of us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the question, I know you were sharing with me last month about the exciting things that's taking place in the month of January, and one of them is, well, the whole year of 2025, but um, one of the things was the alignment that is taking place starting on January 25th. If you could speak on that some, I know it's several planets that are aligning, and it's going to be a great planetary alignment. So if you could share that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some really interesting things happening in our night sky over this month of January, Gregorian January. And the planetary alignment of January 25th, January 25th, I've come to learn, is a peak moment of that alignment. So that alignment actually begins around the 10th of January, according to the Farmer's Almanac. And it's at that point that six planets are going to begin appearing in the night sky together
Mhm.
as in a what is called a planetary parade. So
Mm,
they're going to be appearing in an area of the night sky, which I want to say is, I don't want to misquote. I think it's like the southwest sky.
mhm.
And they're going to appear there in the sky with Sirius and Orion as well. So it's not just our planets, but then it's also a broader celestial event
Mm.
where we're looking at all these planets, and Pleiades is going to factor into that obviously as
Oh
well,
wow. Okay.
just
So
because it's
all these
always
planet
there.
star systems, excuse me, I mean to cut you off. All those
Yeah.
star systems are aligning in addition to the planets.
Yeah, it's almost as if, and I think the word alignment is interesting because it might infer like this idea of a straight line. But that's why I've also come to hear the term parade, and so it's more of like them parading through across the night sky, sort of in their own trajectories. But the
Mm.
way they appear is that they are appearing at the same time in their respective paths. And so
Wow.
it's almost like a convergence or a gathering. It feels like they're gathering together to acknowledge or mark something significant. And so that's very
Mm.
important, though, because again, epigenetically, I do believe that we are being mutated by our biological celestial relationship happening right now. That even if we're not conscious of this going on, it's still affecting us. Everybody's being impacted. And so, yeah, that's a big aspect of that. And again, that begins around the January 10th mark.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was mentioning about January 21st, which is, I think, really where this begins to kick into gear, is that perfectly aligns with that biogenetic new year and Gene Key 41. So these planets are literally showing up in alignment with the timing of our biogenetic new year, which is effectively signaling a new start, in effect, reaching a new phase, perhaps, of our collective shift as it relates to our genetic
Mm-hmm.
and to the code of our DNA and to what is being informed of us or influenced in us by these celestial bodies. So powerful. And then that whole event, this entire parade, evidently goes for about the course of a month. So there's going to be an opportunity to, as we make it conscious, as you actually go out and deliberately engage in it, go out and sit in nature somewhere when it's reaching, near sunset, kind of evening dusk. It's around
Mm-hmm.
that twilight time where it's going to be most visible.
Okay.
Okay. Because everything is always in drift, so you don't want to miss the planets before they go back beneath the horizon right at that point and
Mm-hmm.
are no longer visible. uh, but that's, you just want to time it so that you can really catch it.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so by being present to that, it's going to have its own impact, much less, anything else. I mean, that's the fact, though, is just paying attention to it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Also, sometime I read when just to have some extra information for tonight's show, I did some research. Sometime in January, I think around the 15th, Mars, Earth, and the Sun are supposed to form a line with Earth in the middle. So it's
Yeah.
almost like Mars will be, its entire one side will be illuminated, kind of like a full moon.
Yeah, they call it, I think, Mars at opposition with the
Yes,
Earth. And
yes.
yeah, exactly. It's interesting too because Mars, the quality of Mars, as we're talking about the influence of these planets, Mars has a particular influence on events on Earth.
Mm,
And being that it was regarded Mars, named after the god of war,
mm,
you can imagine that in so characterizing it that way, that over time, different governments and militaries and individuals have attempted to leverage or work with the energy of Mars
mm-hmm.
as it relates to defeating enemies or as it relates to waging battle or conflict and things like that. So I think it's very interesting. We're having that Mars at opposition. What does that bring up for us in our psyche? What does
Yes.
that mean as a reflection on Earth in terms of global conflict? Is this a chance for arriving to peace?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this going to be a moment where, we have more destabilization of,
Mm-hmm.
global geopolitical situations? I mean, obviously there's a lot going on right now on the global stage as
Yes.
far as that's concerned. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that takes shape. Obviously, those days are very significant. I mean, January 15th on one level is the birthlight of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Mm-hmm.
We know that's the date of his birth. I think it's going to be celebrated, though, on the day of the inauguration on January
Interesting.
20th. So that's an
Interesting.
interesting alignment of those
Mm-hmm.
markers. But again, it's the contrast of what is being invited archetypally when you have a national observance of MLK Day,
Mm-hmm.
who effectively stood for peace and universal brotherhood, sisterhood, and consciousness, juxtaposed with other contrasting forces or
Mm-hmm.
energies or agendas that may also be arriving on the scene in a new or particular way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a really interesting thing. It's a changing of the guard in some cases too,
Yes.
because obviously you're talking about a major shift of political administration at that point happening in that on the tail of that Mars at opposition window. So what happens on that January 15th, 16th day and timing is going to further, I think, have some impact into the days to follow. And if we refer to the natural time synchronometer, each of these days are coded with a specific quality regarded as the galactic signature.
Yes.
And so that can be seen as a fourth dimensional marker for opportunity for harmony. So, in other words, where
Mm-hmm.
do we see the opportunity to harmonize on these days? Even though in the third dimension, it looks like contrast and conflict potentially, even though we know Mars is over here having this face off with Earth in a
Mm-hmm.
sense,
Mm-hmm.
how, where Earth is opposing and the sun is being blocked by the whole alignment is kind of awkward because it's like we're looking at Mars like, what's up? And we know Mars again is characterized largely with the conflict. So we're moving into the energy of what's called the red planetary serpent, and
Mm.
that is very interesting because I'm sorry, that's actually the wrong date. I'm getting the wrong date here. So I want to
Well,
find the
which
signature for
date
the
were you looking up?
16th.
You looking up the 20th or the
I'm
15th?
looking up the 16th and the
Okay.
15th just because those are the markers for this Mars event you're mentioning. And
Okay.
so what we have, I looked this up before we got on broadcast actually. So
Mm-hmm.
what we have on January 15th is Kin 192, yellow planetary human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting. I could even read the statement, but then we go from that to 193, red spectral Skywalker. So you're moving from basically a manifestation of wisdom to dissolving it through a sense of wakefulness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a lot of words, but the idea is that we are manifesting some level of collective wisdom
Mm-hmm.
as we come face to face with this Mars contrast, because
Okay.
again, it's also how it might affect us on an individual level, but there's a huge collective thing happening right now. And then we shift from that into this spectral Skywalker orientation where we're actually dissolving and releasing basically anything that's not in alignment with our evolutionary trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a sense, we're getting things out of the way before we arrive to this next phase, this
Mm-hmm.
phase of the planetary alignment, January 25th, when it reaches the peak, but that window, January 21st to February 21st, 22nd. Actually, I found out it's February 28th. So it's January 21st to February
Okay.
28th is the window of the entire planetary parade. So that's
Oh
a pretty
wow.
long
Yeah,
window.
it's about 5 weeks. Okay.
5 weeks. That's a pretty long time, but it
Mm-hmm.
allows us a chance to really set in the new frequency.
Mm.
Because imagine taking our time. They say anything you do for 21 days becomes a habit.
Mm-hmm.
So just imagine having that window of 28 days or plus, however many days that's going to be, 40, 50 days, to really anchor in the new codes. And by that, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, we are literally being shifted biogenetically. However, if we don't engage with nature, if we don't get out into the sunshine, and if we don't get out under the starlight, it's going to be very difficult for us to get the fullness of the experience. We're still going to get benefits, but we've also become very accustomed to being indoors and out of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the shift is actually returning to that order, the original code or blueprint that we all have and we possess internally. We just have to get back into orientation to that blueprint
Mm-hmm.
because we've been compromised for a long time. One interesting conversation I heard recently is that we're in the process of regaining our 12-strand DNA.
Oh wow. Okay.
Because if we go back on this timeline record of humanity, we've been through several iterations of being deduced or broken down
Mm-hmm.
to where even epigenetically at some point we were reduced from 12 strands all the way down to 2.
Mm.
Because, again, this gets into a broader conversation,
Mm-hmm.
though it all relates. But when we talk about the Anunnaki,
Okay.
I'm sure you've heard about an Anunnaki or something to that effect. But there are stories that relate back to the ancient Sumerian culture where the Anunnaki are described as the gods,
Mm-hmm.
basically, that grafted human beings.
Okay.
What
From
that
their DNA.
partially, and other parts of other evolving species on the planet. So they took
Mm-hmm.
combinant parts to create this unique species. But at some point, they broke down the genetic code of it from 12 to basically 2 strand because they didn't want it to be more than that, because then the species, human being, could actually uh, retain higher qualities and talents or skills or gifts or abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But they needed the human to be subservient and to just be a servant. Because according to this particular cosmovision, this particular story,
Mm-hmm.
origin story, we may say, for humanity, humans were created to be slaves. We were
Okay.
created to be the servants of the gods,
Mm-hmm.
of the ancient Sumerians, called the Anunnaki, who grafted human beings that they could mine for gold, that they could
Mm-hmm.
mine planet Earth for gold. So that's an interesting story from our ancient past that we've long been cut off from in terms of having an actual recollection or memory, though the writing's in the wall. It's written in stone. And it would make sense that through the amnesia that we've been subjected to by having reincarnations the way we do, we're not going to retain a lot of the memory unless we can really go through a deep regressive process to get back to it.
Yeah. And
But,
tap in.
and tap in and remember,
Mm-hmm.
or to be put back together again, to literally remember, because we were broken up.
Mm-hmm.
We think about the allegory of Osiris being broken up in however many parts
Mm.
he was broken up into. Imagine that being an allegory for the breakdown of that DNA, in a sense.
Okay.
So it otherwise it reflects the fact that we've been cut off. But now what's happened is the quarantine, effectively, we might consider it over on some level. And that's partially because human behavior has reached such a level to where we're, detrimental to ourselves to a degree that has impact beyond just our planet, if that makes sense. So,
Yes.
in other words, if we are so detrimental that we could be programmed to be destructive the way we've become.
Mm-hmm.
For example, with the detonation of atomic energy and things like this, that's very detrimental to our species. It's detrimental to
Absolutely.
organic life in the
In the
cosmos.
car, right.
So that is kind of one of the shifts, we might say, that's happened that has made it almost required that we have some intervention that would come perhaps from other worlds or come from
Mm,
some other intelligent species in reality to help us course correct a little bit, because you know Earth is a repository for galactic knowledge. So it
mm,
means we have the technology here. I mean, think about it. Look at all the advancements that Earth has made, Earth and society, etc., militaries, governments, human culture has made in the past 50 years, 60 years, 75 years alone, technologically.
mm,
Partially because it's a repository or exchange for different types of knowledge from throughout the cosmos. So some of this advanced technology that we've received has sometimes been characterized as originating from extraterrestrial origins.
mm,
It's not necessarily just from human engineers. It's from our military getting information from higher intelligent species throughout the cosmos
mm,
that are able to find ways or maneuvers to communicate to Earthlings
mm.
where otherwise there's been a quarantine.
Okay.
So just to say, we're in a window right now where the galactic community is aware of this alignment that's coming up.
Oh,
These
great. Okay.
planetary influences, I think, are very conscious, because it's times like this that make it so the veil is more and more thin.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard that. So like around the
Oh,
winter
definitely.
solstice, the veil becomes thin. I would also say in a broader sense, we're at a moment now where this next year is going to be very thin in terms of the veil.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we hopefully will mention the idea of what's coming up in October, but it's important
Yes.
to note that this event in January is kind of a precursor to
For
some other significant markers happening this year.
Okay. And with this being in the galactic time, with this being the blue rhythmic storm year, what is the alignment or the convergence, if you will? What do you think that what's the significance of this being the blue rhythmic storm year? And does it, I guess, what's the
Yeah,
how form the question? Does it have an impact on this alignment or this let's say planetary convergence?
I would say everything is happening in orchestration with itself.
Mm,
So blue rhythmic storm year has a quality of organization, of balance, of equality, and it's also through self-generation and the catalyzation of energy. So that's the quality on the overarching sense. It's an opportunity for humanity, for our collective,
mm-hmm,
to organize balance in a frequency of equality for the purpose of self-generation and the catalyzation of energy.
mm-hmm,
So, yes, it absolutely is setting the stage as a frequency band that, from a natural time sense, is affecting everything and everyone, whether people are aware of natural time or not. It's having an effect. It's a part of the shift in consciousness.
mm-hmm,
So it's impacting us. Now, for those who happen to be aware of the quality of the blue storm, which is the 19th out of the 20 tribes,
mm-hmm,
and the rhythmic tone, which is number 6 out of 13, then they can also derive special inference from understanding uh, what those indicators mean, what they represent. So the blue storm represents self-generation, catalyzation, and energy. And
mm-hmm,
the rhythmic tone represents balance, order, and equality. So that's the quality that this year that we're currently navigating contains. Now we have to mention that we're halfway at this point. We're at the beginning of the new Gregorian year 2025. But for us in the 13 moon year, we're
mm-hmm.
basically in the halfway point. We're
Right.
nearing the resonant moon, which is moon 7
Mm-hmm,
of the 13 moon year. So moon 7 is a very special time because it's the middle of the 13 moons. It's the middle moon.
mm-hmm,
So it's the moon in which we begin to channel and get into attunement and inspiration
Mm.
So we're shifting into that frequency from a new natural time, new Sirius time perspective, while we're also navigating though the Gregorian New Year. Now, one thing I just want to mention though that's very important is, as I mentioned, the biogenetic New Year that occurs with gene key 41 on January 21st through January 27th. That's the
Mm-hmm.
window for that. That is directly opposite the beginning of the 13 moon year. So what does that mean? That means that basically the biogenetic new year programs or stabilizes the galactic natural time 13 moon new year with a day at a time in the first few days of the 13 moon new year.
Mm-hmm.
They're direct opposites when you look at the year. So January 21st is basically directly opposite to
Six.
July 25th.
July 25th. Okay.
So they literally stabilize, we could say, or program each other. According to the gene keys, they're programming each other. So what happens then is, if we're making it conscious now, we literally, by stabilizing our biological genetic code on January 21st, are setting the stage for the galactic counterpart to occur with the galactic new year every day at a
Interesting.
time. So every
Okay.
biogenetic new year programs and informs the 13 moon new year every single time.
Interesting.
And the other interesting thing is very interesting and has to be mentioned is this new knowledge, this new science emerges as a result of energy released with supernova 1987A. This is a supernova explosion that took place and was first noted consciously here on Earth in February of 1987.
Okay.
So what happens, though, is as everything is interconnected, it's understood that there was energy emitted, released from SN 1987A that then became a trigger for new knowledge, galactic cosmic knowledge, to be seeded in Earth. And it came out as manifesting in the form of human design, of the 13 moon calendar, the dream spell, the Galactic Federation codes, that whole emanation, qualitative sort of transmission, as well as the gene keys. So these new knowledge bases are effectively in some way informed by or catalyzed from that explosion of that supernova in 1987.
Okay.
Very
Wow.
interesting to point that out because, there's a lot of other factors that I could point out, but just suffice it to say that that was a major catalytic moment. So this year we're in now is coded by the number 19 because kin 19 is the blue rhythmic storm. Now, in the knowledge base of Mother Tanetta Muhammad, and peace be unto her,
Mm-hmm.
she wrote an article for a long time related to the number 19,
Yes.
the number 19 code. And that is because the number 19 is one of the fractal codes related to the 260-day cycle. And there's sort of a relationship in all of that where you have to get into the numbers and all that science, but there's a direct relationship, in other words, between 19 and 260. There was an article published by, well, I don't even know if it was how publicly it was released, but Dr. Arguelles published an article several years ago
Mm-hmm.
going deeper into that subject. So just to say that this year, coded by the number 19, is deeply significant in this evolutionary shift. It's literally setting the stage. And we move from this year, the blue rhythmic storm year, into what's going to be the yellow resonant seed year. So
Mm.
that will be the new year as of July 26th, 2025.
Okay.
Okay, that's going to be the code for July 26th. And that is when this blue blue rhythmic storm year would have completed on July 24th. Then we have the day out of time, and then the
Right.
next
On the
day
25th. Right.
will be on the 26th, will be the start of that new year.
Mm.
Again, coded by kin 124 yellow resonant seed. And that's going to take us through the end of the year 2025. And like I said, that resonant channel is a time for attunement, inspiration, channeling, really being present to higher awareness.
Mm. Um, the events that are taking place, and this is like really heavy. I gotta sit
I know. It's a
and
lot to navigate.
contemplate and dig deeper with all of this.
Mm,
But it's an exciting science to know about because it's so important. You know, the time and being in harmony with the time and frequencies.
yes.
Um, the events that's taking place in October, could you share with us about that? And I want to see how we can link it back into the events taking place this month.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it definitely connects. So a couple of years ago, my colleague Ruben Yinis, he's
Mm-hmm.
co-founder of the harmonicfactor.com. He and I have been collaborating since the year 2016, 2015, really about calendar change. But as our collaboration has evolved, new discoveries have been made.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these discoveries was made ooh, I don't know the exact. I want to say I think he came to the discovery around 2017, maybe 2018. It's been maturing since then. But basically, where it has led to is the discovery of what we've called now the golden intersection of timelines. This is a big terminology, but basically, it points to a moment of order and harmony where various calendrical systems and mathematical systems and astronomical factors are aligning or intersecting,
Mm-hmm.
but they're only doing so for this one moment. It's as if it's going to ever only happen once,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of interesting to note. It's that rare, but it's something that we've been made conscious of now for a reason before it actually happens. So it's not something that we would have discovered after it passed and said, oh, you know, this happened. But no, this is something happening come October 14th and 15th, 2025. Now, I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment, but it directly connects to the alignment that initiates around January 10th, comes to peak January 25th. And we can imagine, for example, that this alignment in January is sort of like the fertilization or the, when we think about the birthing process, it is it's the initial spark. It's like that moment
The
of
conception.
conception where that kicks into motion, then that window of gestation.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine the most successful conception, okay, and that
Mm-hmm.
being attended by all these planetary influences showing up in the observable night sky for us to literally watch
Mm-hmm.
and derive energy from. And then that sets in motion a 9-month window, basically a 262-day window. Now, when we talk about the Zolkin calendar of the Maya, it's a 260-day calendar. It's
Yes.
literally the gestation cycle. So we're talking about basically fertility and gestation, conception on a mental, spiritual plane. But collectively, it's a moment for humanity to begin to recognize the effect of our focus.
Mm-hmm.
So we're inviting people to begin to increase an awareness about the significance of that window from this January alignment all the way to October, to recognize it's a very, very precious window. It's a golden opportunity. And the reason we say that is because when we do arrive to October 14th and 15th, several things are happening with calendar systems. One
Mm-hmm.
of them is the Gregorian calendar has a sequence count of days. So you can imagine day one of the Gregorian calendar is October 15th, 1582. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So from that day, you begin to count day by day. You get a 1, 2, 3, 4 sequential count. When you get to October 15th, I'll say this, October 14th,
Mm-hmm.
2025, that count reaches a certain number. It reaches the number 161802. 161,802 days coincides with October 14th, 2025. Why is that significant? When
Okay.
we look at mathematics and numbers, you have certain numbers which are indicators of harmony. And one of those numbers is called the phi ratio. It's called the golden proportion.
Mm-hmm.
And mathematically, it is expressed as 1.61803.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that basically October 14th being 161802 and October 15th literally being 161803 is a literal fractal expression of the golden proportion, which is 1.61803. So in math, you move the decimal out of the way and then you just have a count of days. But fractally speaking, that sequence of days is indicating a moment of enormous harmony. Okay, now, so that's one marker happening that day. Another marker happening that day is the completion of basically what are regarded as 13 tune cycles of the traditional Mayan calendar. When we got to the date December 21st, 2012, we completed 13 Baktun cycles. A Baktun cycle is a large cycle of 144,000 days.
Okay.
Well, we completed a Baktun cycle on December 21st, 2012. At that point, the cycle began again, and we started, and mind you, that cycle includes a certain amount of what are called tune cycles. So tune cycles are periods of 360 days. Okay? 360 days. When we get to the date October 14th, 2025, we will have completed 13 360-day cycles since December 21st, 2012. So that's a fractal measuring stick because, again, you're dealing with factors of 13 here in this case. So 13 360-day cycles or 13 tune cycles, a tune being 360 days. When we say get in tune, it literally has layers of meaning. Like stay in tune means be attuned to these natural timing cycles because they're reflections of cosmic intelligence, natural order, right? So these cycles, are compressed or happening together at this moment of the golden intersection, and we're really encouraging people beyond the technical knowledge to recognize the golden opportunity of harmonious alignment with the planet, because the planet, mind you, all of these celestial bodies in January are showing up for the planet. As much as they're showing up for humanity, they're showing up for the planet because they're concerned with the planet, because they know whatever happens to the planet's going to impact them
Exactly.
because they're a family. We need to really reflect and recognize that the celestial bodies, the planetary bodies, are related. Just as we're influenced by them and we're in some ways related to them as well. And so part of that remembrance process and making this a sacred process is approaching this January window in a very sacred way as we initiate ourselves. It's a self-initiation process because we realize there's a beautiful golden opportunity to make conscious this golden intersection of timelines that really, if anything, it's going to enhance whatever you're already doing. It's just make it something that you are aware of because it's going to be a moment that will never, ever occur again. I'll share this little tidbit because we're just now beginning to explore this, but we're inviting people to calculate for themselves where they were when, or where they will be, where they were in my case, because I already passed this marker in my life, but where they may be if they haven't quite reached this marker yet. And that's when you turn 44 years and 3 months old. So we're inviting people to actually do the math, and calculate. This is getting to the question of what is the golden ratio, right? And again, the golden ratio is a mathematical number. It's a marker that shows divine proportion. In other words, there's a proportion in nature that also shows up on the logarithmic spiral, the Fibonacci spiral that people have become more aware of, the Fibonacci sequence. And in that, there's a ratio or proportion that's expressed mathematically as the golden ratio, which basically looks like 1.61803. Now, we've come to learn that you can actually apply that to your own life as a personal count of days, a personal phi day for your own life. And everybody will have that one phi day in their life where you hit a phi day, meaning you hit that day where you've lived for basically 16,180 days. because that's the number 16180. That's the phi ratio. So as a fractal, we can identify where the phi ratio shows up in our lifetime as a moment, if you will, of intersectional harmony. Because it's probably something for me, if you're looking past, because I turned that it'll happen when you're 44 years old and so many days, or basically 3 months. It's like the average of 44.3. So
Okay.
you reflect on where you were at that point in your life, and it helps you understand what was happening at that golden ratio moment of your own life. It's a universal factor. Everybody will have the same, like they'll have a golden ratio moment at that same age of their life. It's like people talking about they have their Saturn return when they're 28.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has that according to astrology in your life. So similarly, we're realizing that everybody has that phi day, that golden ratio moment in their lives when they're 44 years old in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. And I'll show you what's even more interesting is come October 15th, guess how old the Gregorian calendar will be?
Um, you just said at the beginning of the lecture, you said it was, um, has it been 500?
Well, almost, but it'll be 443 years.
440, 443,
So
543.
because
Okay.
so it'll be 443 years. And what I'm saying is on its 443rd birthday on October 15th, 2025,
Mm-hmm.
we'll be able to identify this golden ratio moment for the Gregorian calendar that will never happen again. In other words, it's reached a frequency of days of 161803.
Mm-hmm.
But similarly to us, we'll reach that when we're 44.3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We'll reach 16180 days in our own human lifespan, whereas this calendar is reaching 443. So you
Okay.
can begin to see the fractal sort of relationship: 44.3 for the human, 443 for the Gregorian calendar this year,
Mm-hmm.
which is why making that conscious right now is such a special moment, because it's, in a way, it's new knowledge. As I said before I started to talk about it, it's a new discovery that we can apply the golden ratio to these timelines, and that what emerges are all these factors of synchronization across different timekeeping systems. So
Amazing. Okay.
we're actually producing right now an infographic to kind of break that down in
Mm-hmm.
as simple terms as possible, just to provide for people the references so
Mm-hmm.
they can do their own research, because all the things I'm sharing with you are researchable, and you can compare and contrast, especially in the era of chat GPTs and all these other technologies, to go and gather information and compare and contrast. The information is certainly available.
And where will this information sheet be shared?
People can follow us at theharmonicfactor.com. That's our primary website. We also invite people to follow us on our ongoing Facebook page, which is called Harmonic Convergence 2028. Also can be found as Harmonic Convergence 2020 to 2028. That's on Facebook. We do have a new IG account that we're encouraging people to check out, called At the Galactic Spin, which is the name of our podcast.
Okay.
And our podcast airs every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. on the East Coast. We air live on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/at the Harmonic Factor.
Okay, at the harmonic factor. Okay.
Yep,
If
at
you,
the
if you
Harmonic Factor.
can be so kind, you could put it in the chat. That would
Of
help.
course, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
Go ahead and do that
Now,
there.
with all this convergence of all
Mhm.
these energies and these numerical frequencies that you mentioned, how can we prepare for this? What do you recommend?
That's a great question, and I mean, I you know I think right now it's interesting because I had a very similar conversation with a mutual friend, Elder Kwame Sunhorse, recently.
Mm-hmm.
And, what can we do to prepare for these things? Uh, Whatever we can do to simplify and neutralize, off disengage from the inferences or influences that are artificial in nature,
Mhm.
that are, directing our lives in a downward spiral through fear. We're trying to
Mhm.
program fear or
Mhm.
division or derision into our consciousness. We have to do whatever we can do to off disengage that. That's where I think it begins at this point, because it's such a critical time that we just have to be very vigilant about what we actually entertain in our thought life. Because right now, thoughts are things. And like I said, that veil is very thin. So the distance between your thought and its manifestation is also very uh, short. So
Okay.
being diligent and dutiful about the thoughts we're keeping is
Mhm.
a blessing. It could be a two-edged sword, obviously, because you don't want to hold thoughts that you don't want to manifest, whether it's grievances or anger. We really want to encourage people to move and shift into almost prepared forgiveness,
Mm.
because you don't want to let grievances disrupt your receptivity to what's coming through right now. You don't want to let some other interference become a distraction that you miss the memo, so to speak, because everybody has the, how to say, the line of communication with source. It's
Mhm.
just that it takes effort to tap into that line of communication. It takes attention, right? And that requires a focus of sorts. So we want to really be dutiful about generating a focus of love and
Mhm.
gratitude right now. We want to create a field of gratitude that's impenetrable, in
Mm.
fact, even to the degree where you're grateful for the dilemmas, you're grateful for the challenges. You got to shift into that at this point in the initiation, because again, it's such a delicate time and you don't want anything to take you out of your center or off your square, so to speak.
Yes.
But there's a lot of influences out here that are trying to, trust me, they're trying to side rail as many of us as they can. And not only are they just organic distractions, these are artificial distractions now at this point. These are AI
Absolutely.
generated distractions and
Mhm.
memes and algorithms that are being informed by our our scrolling habits, that are being informed by whatever browsing we're doing at any given moment, that are being informed by the conversations that they pick up on our devices, because we're constantly being monitored.
Mhm.
Unless you're turning your phone completely on air, what air status or whatever,
Mhm.
airplane mode, you know. I guess the point I'm making is we just have to be very dutiful to protect our energy right now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because we're being bombarded with a lot of contrasting energies, and many of them are fabrications.
Mhm.
So we want to tap in, and because right now, one of the most important superpowers we need to tap into is our discernment, so that we can distinguish between what's fake and what's authentic. But the best way to do that is to be authentic ourselves, honestly.
Mhm.
Like, be authentic. Then you will manifest and attract a like frequency of authenticity.
Mhm.
Right. So the idea right now is to be the frequency that you want to entertain in your life. Be that frequency.
Mhm.
And, for me, what does that look like? I need to get out in nature more. I live in Los Angeles, California. It's one of the densest places on planet Earth right now,
Mhm.
though it has an abundance of beautiful green spaces.
Okay.
So I need to make way into the green spaces more often, or make my way with my family to the beach and the ocean more often, as a deliberate intention to be connected, stay connected,
Mhm.
as much as possible. I mean, we're also intending and anticipating some significant moves ourselves, because we realize this golden opportunity, this is the reason we came to planet Earth,
Mhm.
actually. We didn't come here to be subservient and some gold miner for the Anunnaki of the current administration, or any of these current manifestations of the, of
Right.
the, of the boo-boo. That's not what we chose to do.
Right.
So but according to that, then you have to step into self-generation. You have to step into self-empowerment, because when you say that you're no longer interested in the business as usual, or the drama and the scheme and the fabrication, then you suddenly step into a void where you have to get self-empowered. You have to find the others. You have to engage in relationships like this Find others like yourself who are out here shifting the paradigm by holding spaces like this with your community. I mean, you're living in a bilingual life. You're speaking Spanish. So you're exposing and availing yourself to the global South and communities around the world that speak the multiple languages you're speaking. Those are the kind of things that we want to really inspire people to start to get into. I'd also say, just in closing, whatever it is your big vision is that you want to manifest, that you want to fulfill, absolutely go for it right now. Now is the time to completely commit and go for it. And in doing that, also recognize that you're not going to do anything in this life alone. You're not going to do it alone. You're going to do it in harmony, in collaboration, in cooperation, in synchrony with others. Because because in reality, we have to move toward modeling nature. Nature is interdependent. It's interconnected at every point.
Yes.
Everything is. So as we are seeking to evolve, we want to seek to model nature through our behavior and our frequency as much as we can, because that's how we return to natural time. That's the benefit of tuning into these natural biorhythms and timing systems, is that we can become more telepathically connected with nature and therefore be in proper information, get into formation, get the proper information, right? So we begin to intuit where we need to be, you know? And part of that addendum is just to say, as I've heard a great speaker recently speaking on, RJ Spina is his name, if people want to look him up, but he's a meditation master, and he focuses on a simple triad, I'll call it, of desire, attunement, and intention. So right now, it's very important that we get clear on what we desire. And I think that's where we want to align our will with the will of the Most High. That's the best way, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, I don't think I could want something better for myself than the Most High wants for me. So I want to align my desire to what the Most High desires for me, right? And then from that basis, I want to get my attention on things that are going to move me in the direction of fulfilling that desire, and shore up my intention, to really establish, that intention to create. So I think as we navigate this window of opportunity before us, as we really reach this threshold of January 25th, that peak moment, I really do want to encourage people just to take your time, be still. This is definitely an inside job. Find the value in your internal well-being and that sort of spiritual hygiene of sorts that we might want to implement now, just as we prepare the space, because come January 25th, you want to begin already to be in position to take advantage of this sacred moment, sacred momentum.
Thank you for that answer. That was wonderful. Yes, and this was very informative. And I'm definitely, I'm feeling a big shift taking place in my life right now. So definitely going to focus on the self-empowerment and the things to manifest. And it feels like almost like a new spring taking place. And I hear a few other people are saying that as well. It's like things that they've wanted and have focused on for a long time. It just wasn't happening. And then now all of a sudden it's starting to manifest for many of us. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And
And then we can use these energies and this time to, focus on, like you said, the veil is thin when it comes to the time we think a thought and manifest. But this is be a great time to let's shift the planet to one of more peace and harmony and um just love for one another, because we know what's happening, but it's up to us to make some of those changes.
Definitely. I was just thinking, I mean, it really is an inside job. And so as we establish that intention from our attention, rooted in that divine desire, it's here. It's here. The opportunity and challenge becomes continuing that consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
How can we maintain that frequency, as then life will throw certain things up in our path to challenge us or stabilize that focus, to ensure the integrity of that focus, that we don't get thwarted by, again, interferences and distractions, because we want to really begin to stabilize such a field of gratitude that it's impenetrable, unshakable. It's like they speak about in Islam, like al-ratib, like unshakable faith.
Mm-hmm.
That's the dimension that we're required to access right now, is unshakable faith. Because, I mean, we're talking about, the nature of this time. We are getting divine intervention. I would say these planets coming into attendance with
Mm-hmm.
us as we turn our attention to the skies and keep our eyes on the sky, that is an expression of divine intervention. We want to certainly be in concert and symphony and harmony with that, because that also reflects the quality of this blue rhythmic storm year of order and balance.
Mm-hmm.
So very exciting time, and I look forward to us being able to tap in again here in the near future. I would love to have you as a guest on the Galactic Spin podcast, because we'd like to talk with you
Oh,
about some of
indeed.
what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
relative to your yoga work, because that's
Mm-hmm.
obviously direct applied science. That is a part of the toolkit and the medicine wheel, that is before us, is things for
Yes,
us to access
definitely.
and activate. But we want to certainly explore that with you, and also looking at sort of what's on the frontier for all of us, with things, as I said, kind of branching out from maybe our current geolocations into some of the aspirational places in Mexico or
Mm-hmm.
the global south, where we see family and community emerging, and
Yes,
some
definitely.
beautiful things on the horizon. So we look forward to having you on our show as well in the
Oh,
very
I'd
near
be
future.
honored to be on there. Yes, that'll be great. And
Forward.
then, yes, also working with you also to hold this space during this sacred season for, starting on the 10th. You said that's when the shift is going to start taking place.
Yeah, it's going to start taking place on the 10th, according to what Farmer's Almanac was saying, and what I'm seeing that is sort of the pre-phase, and then by the 21st, when we're literally crossing that biogenetic New Year, Gene Key 41, I think that's when we're going to really start to get into it. We do have a show on January 20th where we're going to basically dive deep into what's to come, January 21st, so on and so forth. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to really kind of amplify it at that point. But then I think, together, certainly with you, I would love to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly invite our brother Bilal's participation into this as well. But we do something
Absolutely.
of an energetic attunement,
Mm-hmm.
or meditation or intention focus around the 25th. Because
Yes.
I think as it's hitting those peak moments, that will be a wonderful time to drop in and posit something beautiful
Mm-hmm.
and put it out there for anybody who's in resonance with it, just to join in.
Yeah.
And the idea is, again, it's, for me, that's kind of like the intro. That's like the herald moment to this golden intersection of timeline. So that moment is very, very potent for us, being that a couple of days later, we start the countdown of 260 days to the following kin 204. So
Mhm.
it's going to be very special. And that day also, if I'm not mistaken, we enter,
Aquarius on
202.
the 20th, I think.
Okay.
I
And
think,
that's
yeah.
a beautiful thing, because, being that's kind of an amplification of Pluto in Aquarius now, which we know has just
Mm-hmm.
happened, which I'll also say, numerically, it's going to be there for about 19 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in a current year called the Blue Overtone Storm, which is coded by number 19. We know we're going to be in this Aquarian phase of Pluto and Aquarius for 19 years. So you can see again that frequency 19 shows up as well.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the letter Lam in the Islamic alphabet, in Arabic rather, in the Arabic alphabet. Lam, the 19th letter.
Is it?
Is
Okay.
it shaped like a hook? It's like a shepherd's hook, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
Lamb,
Yeah,
yes. Mm-hmm.
lamb, yeah. And so that's an interesting inference, though, to again what that's actually inferring, because I understand the shepherd's hook really relates to Christ consciousness,
Mm.
and the shepherd, or Christ,
Mm-hmm.
gathering his flock,
His
or
flock.
those in resonance and those following the law, if
Mm-hmm.
you will, the cosmic divine law. So again, there's a lot happening. The star Sirius is doing some amazing things this time. We're just in this vortex, this window of the past. Last night and tonight, Sirius is very prominent
Mm-hmm.
in its association with the completion of the Gregorian year, the beginning of a new one. But it's also an anchor at this time of year. It's always that marker.
Mm-hmm.
It's also regarded as that star that guides the wise men, and the allegory
Mm-hmm.
of
It was the star
Christmas.
Sirius. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah, which is so powerful. So we can go on forever, but I
Yes.
greatly appreciate love, your time and energy, and thank you
Appreciate
for the
you so much.
invitation to be here.
Always, it's a supreme honor to have you on the show and just to share this knowledge with us, because I feel like this is something that has been long forgotten, a lot of this information, and it's emerging and reawakening that place within us that wants to connect with nature and that wants to connect with the time and frequencies. And just since I've been following the galactic calendar, I feel like it does make some aspects of life a little bit more smooth than just the Gregorian calendar. So I thank you and appreciate that.
Absolutely. My pleasure, my honor. Wonderful.
Yes.
And Lakesh, thank you so much.
Okay.
Peace to the
Well, thank you.
family. We'll connect
Peace.
soon.
Peace to the little one too.
Thank you very
All
much.
right. And then peace
Okay.
and love everyone for watching. Thank you and bid you good night. And I'm in the live stream.